Welcome to today's presentation on high-tech surveillance of moving suspects in the Constitution. In this presentation, we'll explore three landmark Supreme Court cases that made a significant impact on civil rights and surveillance in the digital age. I'm sure that you'll find the information presented here to be insightful and thought-provoking. Let's begin. Over the past 10 years, the Supreme Court has tackled the matter of surveillance of traveling suspects in three significant legal proceedings: U.S. v. Jones, Riley v. California, and Carpenter v. U.S. All of these cases have one thing in common: the utilization of comparatively advanced technology to monitor and trace those being examined. In U.S. v. Jones, police force started the monitoring, whereas in the other two cases, law enforcement drew on information obtained from the suspects' own sophisticated devices to monitor their activities. The extent and legal consequences of the evidence acquired from these cases can be intricate and wide-reaching. In 2012, the Supreme Court ruled in U.S. v. Jones that using a GPS tracking device qualified as a Fourth Amendment search. This served as a pivotal moment in the history of the amendment, as it established for the first time that a search could be conducted without physical intrusion. This precedent allows law enforcement to use technology to increase their capabilities while still safeguarding the right to privacy. The U.S. Supreme Court in a 2012 case unanimously found that the installation of a GPS tracking device on the suspect's vehicle was a violation of the Fourth Amendment. The majority opinion viewed this as a violation of the suspect's effect, while the minority opinion held that the suspect had a reasonable expectation of privacy. This decision brings us to the topic of how high-tech surveillance affects the Constitution. GPS systems first became publicly available in 1993 and in 2000. The intentional errors of up to 100 meters in the publicly available navigation signals, known as selective availability, SAW, were removed by Bill Clinton, allowing users worldwide to use the system. U.S. v. Jones was a Supreme Court case from 2012 that did not directly answer the question of how new technology should be approached. Justice Sotomayor, however, wrote in her opinion that the definition of a search is dependent on new technologies and the government's ability to aggregate information. Former FBI Director Robert Mueller also testified that the U.S. v. Jones decision had limited the FBI's surveillance capabilities. In 2012, U.S. v. Jones saw the defendant tried at a federal district court based on cell site location data. Despite the jury being evenly split leading to a mistrial, the defendant eventually accepted a plea deal of 15 years in prison with credit for time served. This case highlighted the importance of protecting our constitutional rights in the face of the potential misuse of technology and data collection. Riley v. California is an illustrative demonstration of the utilization of high-tech monitoring methods to catch suspects. During a traffic stop, law enforcement uncovered a loaded weapon and gang items, which eventually led to convicting the accused for a shooting. This event signifies the importance of honoring constitutional rights and permitting the police to competently and resourcefully investigate criminal activities. The Supreme Court established an exception to searches incident to an arrest in 2014 with the ruling of Riley v. California, recognizing that the digital contents of cell phones may not be searched without a warrant. The Supreme Court argued that a cell phone is distinct from ordinary objects because technology allows for a greater amount of personal information to be stored in it, and that searches incident to an arrest do not extend to cell phone contents. Instead, a valid warrant or exceptional circumstances must be present in order to search a cell phone. Law enforcement officers must now obtain a warrant before searching cell phones during an arrest, following the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling in 2014. Justice Roberts noted in his opinion the growing presence of smartphones in our lives and how this presence is rapidly changing the law. The court recognized the Fourth Amendment protection of personal data stored on these devices and requires a warrant for its search, thus ensuring the right to privacy enshrined in the Constitution remains. In 2014, the United States Supreme Court unanimously ruled on the case of David Riley. While police are allowed to search a suspect's cell phone, they cannot search its contents without a warrant. This decision was a major milestone for digital privacy advocates. However, although the Supreme Court decision was in favor of privacy, it did not change the outcome of Riley's case. Riley remains in prison, convicted of attempted murder and other charges. This case is a reminder that the issue of privacy and technology are still evolving in our society. The Supreme Court's ruling on the Carpenter case significantly strengthens the protection of citizens' Fourth Amendment rights, which defend us against unreasonable searches and seizures by the government. The Supreme Court held that obtaining an individual's cell phone records without a valid warrant is unconstitutional, given that these records contain intimate details of a person's life. This decision limits the government's ability to access personal information and asserts the right of individuals to privacy, as guaranteed by the Fourth Amendment. This landmark ruling has been widely praised by those dedicated to preserving citizens' rights and freedoms. The U.S. Supreme Court ruling in Carpenter v. U.S. in 2018 revolutionized the debate around the constitutional protection of people against high-tech surveillance. Timothy Carpenter faced charges of robbery and firearms offenses after his cell site location records tracked his whereabouts for 127 days and showed him at the scene of the crime. The ruling determined that a warrant was needed before law enforcement could search such records, making it a landmark precedent for when moving suspects are under surveillance. Carpenter v. U.S., 2018, has implications for Fourth Amendment rights and high-tech surveillance of moving suspects. The Supreme Court left the third-party doctrine in effect, but declined to extend it to cases involving cell site location information. The ACLU hailed this as a victory for privacy rights, but the Supreme Court remanded the case to the lower court to consider the evidence for a good faith exemption to the exclusionary rule in Carpenter's case. The lower court held that the FBI had acted in good faith according to the Stored Communications Act, allowing for Carpenter's 116-year sentence to remain unaffected. How does this decision impact the use of high-tech surveillance of moving suspects? The implications of high-tech surveillance of moving suspects for the Constitution have been widely debated. Nevertheless, there is something we can do to immediately benefit Nevada and its citizens, and that is to use dash cams. Dash cams are an effective and economical way of resolving incidents such as road rage, and yet these devices still aren't as commonplace in the US as in other countries. Just recently, my neighborhood was shaken by a fatal road rage incident that occurred on I-15. This tragedy could have been prevented if dash cams had been used. It's time to prioritize public safety and increase our ability to solve crimes with the help of dashboard cameras. High-tech surveillance can be a powerful tool to help make our neighborhoods safer when integrated with proper legal protections. It is possible to both protect our Constitution and increase public safety when security cameras are regulated correctly. They can help deter crime, help identify suspects after a crime has been committed, and even help solve crimes where no other evidence exists. We should consider the implications of how and when to use such technology and be mindful of the potential effects on civil liberties. High-tech surveillance can be a powerful tool to help keep our neighborhoods safe and provide justice to those affected by crime. With modern technology, we can use cameras to deter and identify those responsible for criminal activity. We can also use this technology to detect and investigate crimes when no other evidence may exist. It is important to consider how and when the technology should be used, and to be aware of the impact it has on civil liberties. By understanding and regulating this technology correctly, we can ensure the safety of our communities while still preserving our Constitution. Law enforcement officers are entrusted to enforce the law, safeguard citizens, and not take it upon themselves to act outside of the regulations of the law. Stalking, harassing, or causing annoyance through audio or video recording should not be done, and furthermore, devices must not be taken to places which forbid them. In doing so, respect and obedience of the law will ensure that justice is served. Reflecting on what we discussed, governmental authority can extend to private parties if their activities become heavily entangled with those of the government. This means that any private party's activities can be subject to the restrictions outlined by the U.S. Constitution, and can potentially be in violation of state and federal privacy laws. Thank you for your attention and thoughtful engagement.